We count down the 10 best wrestlers of the decade here on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. For news, reviews, and conversations on everything pro wrestling, subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. It's been a very interesting 10 years, Ralph.
Yeah, it certainly has. There's been a lot of changes in the industry. It certainly has gone by fast. When you look at where the industry was at the beginning of the decade versus where it is now, a lot of interesting things have developed over the years. And obviously, one of the things we're going to talk about is talent, marketability, and everything in between all of that.
Right. So before we get to our top 10, our criteria for this is a collective agreement based on in-ring ability, draw, character work, and their booking with whatever promotions that they've worked for.
Sure.
So you made 10, I made 10, and then based off of that, we made a collective 10. So without that, further ado, let's start the list. At number 10, Randy Orton. Now, this one, I think a lot of people might be questioning why he would be on our top 10. But when you think about everyone in WWE and, you know, everyone comes and goes, everyone has an injury, forced to retire to come back from injury. This guy didn't really have a great run for a while, but Randy Orton, for the past decade, has been a reliable wrestler. You could put him in the main event. You could put him in the upper mid card, the lower mid card, and he has delivered in whatever they give him in WWE.
Yeah.
He's not going to be the guy that gives you a 5-star match, but every match that he has been somewhat entertaining.
Yeah.
So in that regards, this is a guy that has to be in the top 10 for wrestlers of the decade.
Yeah, I'd agree. And, you know, his tenure there, he's been there for, it seems like almost forever.
Yeah.
So he's somebody that has certainly been consistent. Like you said, you're not going to get an all-time great match out of him, but he has had some very good matches. Probably one of the most notable ones that comes to mind was the triple threat that culminated the end of the I should say the beginning or the climax of the Yes movement, where Daniel Bryan ultimately won the championship. That the match was obviously between Daniel Bryan, Randy Orton, and Batista. That was one of the most iconic moments, probably people would say, in WrestleMania history. So while he's not going to go out there and have the greatest matches of all time, they're still good to very good, you know, and he has good feuds. He's a good promo, especially when it's something that he can sink his teeth into. I think probably the most notable stuff that he's done to date has been with AJ. So leading into WrestleMania, their feud, they had some good back and forth promos.
The stuff that he did with the Authority and Seth Rollins too, with the probably one of the best finishes to any match at WrestleMania history, where he reversed the curb stomp into an RKO.
Yeah. And not only that, but you bring up finishes. So one of the most iconic finishes of all time is the RKO. The RKO from out of nowhere, really one of the more iconic calls that you hear from the commentary team. You know,
it turned into a meme on social media, people, you know, mimicking it on YouTube and Vine and Twitter and whatever social media has been there throughout the decade. I mean, just for that alone, I mean, this is why he's in the top 10.
Absolutely.
Moving on to number 9 is Brock Lesnar. Now, a lot of people might not agree with this, but you know what? Brock Lesnar for the last 8 or so years has really been a big draw in WWE, has delivered some pretty good matches with the likes of AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan. And every time he's on TV, the ratings do seem to go up.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people get frustrated with him, and he's certainly a polarizing character, but I think one of the most important things, especially when you're talking about professional wrestling, if you're going to work for the WWE, is the ability to draw. Now, Brock Lesnar, for anything people want to say about him being a part-time champion or not being there all the time, I certainly understand all of that. But for a good majority of the time he's been there, when he's in there with the right guy, when he's working the right type of match, the match is going to deliver. So you mentioned a few of those individuals. The match with CM Punk certainly was another match that comes to mind. And his ability to draw, so not only is he able to draw within the WWE, but he also had similar draw power when it comes to UFC. So being somebody who can go and be successful in both markets, whether it's MMA or professional wrestling, it just goes to show you, like, a lot of people will point to it and say, yeah, well, Cena was on the card too, or this guy was on the card too, so that's why it drew good numbers. But in reality, there's no really ifs, ands, or buts about it. Brock Lesnar is a draw.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most important things is having the ability to put asses in the seats.
Yep.
And that is why Vince McMahon continuously highlights Brock Lesnar in these big matches at big events. It's as simple as that. You can't talk about professional wrestling or the WWE over the past decade without bringing up Brock Lesnar, in my opinion.
No, definitely. I agree with that. And the fact that he has main evented several WrestleManias, several SummerSlams, several Survivor Series of those, big four pay-per-views, and has been in championship matches in the Royal Rumble, just goes to show you how trusted Vince McMahon is of him, and shows why, despite some people saying, oh, he's a part-time champion, he's not always there. I mean, part of the prestige of him is the fact that he's not there all the time. So
exactly. Yeah.
So, and he is also the guy that broke the Undertaker streak.
Yeah. Not only did he break Undertaker's streak, but let's not forget how big the Suplex City thing really was. He sold tons of t-shirts. When he said that during the match with Roman Reigns, that was one of the top grossing WrestleManias of all time. I believe it was in the top 3. A couple other things that he did during that time was, Money in the Bank. He won the Money in the Bank, as controversial as that was. Some good matches in between. Granted, he's not really necessarily somebody who's going to go out there and have a great promo, but he's got Paul Heyman that's with him. They come as a package, and you can't really take that away from him. So if you don't have the ability to talk or to have a good promo, you got to have somebody who's your counterpart that's going to be able to do that. And Paul Heyman certainly has been able to promote Brock Lesnar and talk about all of the things he's been able to achieve over the course of that decade, whether it's in the UFC or in WWE.
Number 8, Roman Reigns. This one's going to be polarizing. I know a lot of people are not a fan of Roman Reigns. I think this all started with the promo where he said suffering succotash. Since then, it's just been downhill for Roman Reigns. Now, he is a good wrestler in the ring. I think his promo has gotten better throughout the decade. However, this is a guy that his booking really suffered due to the fans' backlash, and probably could have been higher on this list if it wasn't for that.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Roman Reigns, certainly a polarizing character, but you have to consider his time in the Shield. The Shield will go down as probably one of the most popular factions of all time, without question. So he was definitely a big part of that. Now, WWE did certainly take some missteps when trying to book him or promote him, and the fans over the last, decade, I guess you could say, they've been more likely to push back, especially when they feel like a wrestler is being forced down their throats. Now, I think this probably happened right around the time where Roman Reigns one year was one of the finals in the Royal Rumble.
So in 2014, he came in second to Batista, and everyone was behind him. And I think that was just because they didn't want Batista to win. So they were rooting for anybody. Then the following year, he wins the Royal Rumble when everybody kind of knew it. And being in Philadelphia, one of the hottest crowds and very vocal crowds that wrestling has to offer, they crapped all over that. And it was to the point where even The Rock could not turn the crowd over.
And I think that was even at the point where Daniel Bryan had returned from injury. Everyone assumed, and we should never really make assumptions, especially when it comes to professional wrestling, but a lot of people felt like Daniel Bryan was going to go out there, win the Royal Rumble, go on to WrestleMania main event, and win the title back. Now, that didn't happen. A lot of people were pissed off about that. And unfortunately, ever since that point, Roman Reigns has kind of gotten crapped on by the fans. Now, one of the things that we have to look at when we're considering professional wrestlers and how successful they are is their ability to draw. Now, the top 3 WrestleManias in terms of grossing revenue all time, Roman Reigns has main evented 3 of those. So all 3 of them. So 1, 2, and 3, when you look at how much money was brought in, it has to be noted that Roman Reigns was a part of that and a part of that success. So whether people want to talk about his in-ring ability, his ability to cut promos, I get all of that. I understand he's polarizing. He's certainly not my favorite professional wrestler of all time, but he does have the ability to draw. So that has to be taken into consideration.
Moving on to number 7, Hiroshi Tanahashi, the ace of New Japan Pro Wrestling. One of the reasons why New Japan Pro Wrestling is where it is today. Of course, his feuds with Kazuchika Okada between 2012 and 2016, where they exchanged the IWGP Heavyweight Championship multiple times. He's headlined Wrestle Kingdom multiple times, including this past one with Kenny Omega in an incredible match, one of Kenny Omega's best matches to date, and a guy that has won multiple G1 climaxes, a guy that, when you first talk about guys in New Japan Pro Wrestling and you talk about a guy like Hiroshi Tanahashi, the comparison that comes to mind is John Cena for his ability to resurrect a promotion that was kind of in its lower points in its time. He was able to resurrect it with his in-ring ability, his character, the ace. I mean, no reason why he should not be on this top 10.
No, I mean, he has to be. And especially when you're talking professional wrestling, just like in sports and entertainment, there's going to be ups and downs and peaks and valleys when it comes to the popularity of a promotion or a product, right? Now, when you talk about Tanahashi, he's really one of the guys that helped, like you said, resurrect New Japan Pro Wrestling when it started to get back into its more, to where it is now, expand on its popularity. Looking at some of the all-time classic matches of New Japan Pro Wrestling, people are going to talk about him. So we can't make a top 10 list over the last decade without considering him because of all of that.
Right. And he's also the only person with Shinsuke Nakamura to main event a Wrestle Kingdom that did not have the IWGP Heavyweight Championship on the line.
Yep.
Won 2 G1 climaxes in this past 10 years and won 4 IWGP Heavyweight Championships. So they book him strong. He has great matches. He is the ace of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Number 6, Kenny Omega.
The cleaner.
Yes, a lot of people would say he's number 1, but why is he not number 1?
Well, I wouldn't consider him number 1 or closer to the top 5 because he didn't necessarily do it long enough. Now, what he has been able to accomplish over the past, let's say, 4 years is certainly impressive. I mean, he didn't earn the nickname the best bout machine by accident. I mean, quite literally, where we are in the professional wrestling industry with AEW and just the landscape of professional wrestling right now with the resurgence of New Japan Pro Wrestling and everything else wouldn't be what it is without his matches with Okada and the work that he's done over the last, 3 to 4 years within New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, New Japan Pro Wrestling, while the promotion is probably second largest in considering, WWE in comparison to other promotions, Kenny Omega was a big part of the reason why New Japan's popularity has grown over the last 4 or so years. And that has a lot to do with his matches with Okada, Tanahashi, the Bullet Club being the lead. I mean, obviously Finn Balor or Prince Devitt, whichever you want to consider him at the time, he was a leader of the faction. AJ Styles was a leader of the faction, but I don't think they quite got to the heights that Kenny Omega was able to bring the faction to. So he had success with the Bullet Club. I mean, we know that they were able to sell a bunch of t-shirts with Hot Topic and sell out those t-shirts and everything else. And that's impressive because they didn't have the machine like WWE backing them. They really did that on their own. Some could point to Madison Square Garden selling out. Some could point to All In. All of those things have to be attributed, in large part, I would say, to the success that Kenny Omega has had. So I don't think we can talk about where we currently are within the professional wrestling industry without talking about the success that Kenny Omega has had over the past 3 to 4 years.
Now, you bring up great matches that Kenny Omega has had. You look at New Japan Pro Wrestling, he's had great matches with Okada, as you mentioned. The 4 matches that really brought the Western Hemisphere to talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, thanks to Dave Meltzer and his star ratings. Hiroshi Tanahashi, arguably the greatest G1 Climax final against Tetsuya Naito in 2017. And, of course, the tag team matches that he's had with the Golden Lovers and Kota Ibushi, leading the Bullet Club. The fact that they announced the G1 Supercard at Madison Square Garden without any match announced and people speculating that it would be Okada versus Omega 5. And that sold out. That speaks volumes of how well he has been able to cross over both in Japan and here in the United States.
Yep.
So he's definitely worthy of the top 10. I mean, I personally might have put him in the top 5. A lot of people would put him at top 1. So, comment what you think on why Kenny Omega should be there, but he's definitely in the conversation for Wrestler of the Decade.
Absolutely.
Number 5, Chris Jericho. Name me a wrestler who has made an impact in 3 different promotions in the past 10 years. That list is very small.
Yeah.
Chris Jericho is definitely one of them.
Yeah. I mean, his ability to reinvent himself in comparison to like the Y2J character to who he is now as the Painmaker and what he was doing in New Japan Pro Wrestling can't be understated enough, because we see wrestlers who are the same character throughout the entirety of their professional wrestling career. Now, he is somebody who is able to reinvent himself time and time again, and just seeing what he's been able to accomplish over the last 10 years. You talk about his work with Kevin Owens, the list, the stuff that he's currently doing in AEW, being the first AEW heavyweight champ, well, the only one to date, but
still the youngest champion.
Yeah, late champion,
a little bit of the bubbly,
all of
Painmaker,
yeah, and not
Alpha
only that,
Club.
Not only that, but when he did go to New Japan Pro Wrestling and when he did wrestle Kenny Omega, since we just talked about him, 100,000 new subscriptions to New Japan Pro World app, just so people could watch that match. And I think that at the time, I recall waking up at like 3 a.m. just to watch that match. So that says a lot, especially when you consider that WWE is the big dog in town. Like it's still the largest promotion in the world. But having that ability to promote yourself, it speaks volumes, especially when he's able to do it wherever he goes.
Right. And, with him being involved in AEW, I think that really is the only reason why they were able to lock that deal with TNT, why people are buying hundreds of thousands of pay-per-views for All Out, for Double or Nothing, for Full Gear, why people consistently watch AEW Dynamite. He is one of, if not the reason people watch on a weekly basis.
He's the biggest name. He's the biggest name by far that AEW has under contract right now.
Right.
So when you look at that, I mean, had he not gone there, I think that some of these guys that they're going to be targeting over the next year or so, when they become free agents, like the Revival, whoever else, Marty Scurll, it might be a little bit harder for them to sign with AEW, but knowing that they were able to secure an all-time great talent like Chris Jericho, and just having that name, like they've talked about, their ability to get TV deals and stuff like that is now easier because they have somebody as notable as Chris Jericho under contract. So can't be understated enough. All of the accomplishments he's had over the last 10 years. And it's not, I understand he's not going out there and putting on all-time great matches, but it's being able to market yourself.
Right.
Being somebody who can draw, and he certainly can do that.
Right. And of course, people are going to say, well, he's only been a part-timer for some of the decade. Well, you look at the beginning of this decade, he was a world champion and had a decent feud with CM Punk.
Yeah, absolutely.
To start out this decade. So, I mean, it has been consistently there. So that's why Chris Jericho makes the top 5 on our list. But moving on, number 4, Daniel Bryan. Talk about a Cinderella story here. This is a guy who started the decade being part of the Nexus, getting fired because he choked Justin Roberts with a tie, went back to the indie scene, made a name for himself again, and then coming back to WWE to be the most supported underdog this industry probably has ever seen.
One of them,
sure. Definitely has, consistently brought on great match after great match, and it knows how to engage with the crowd, whether that is a heel or a babyface. You got Team Hell No. You got his stuff that he was doing with AJ Lee when he was the World Heavyweight Champion, Money in the Bank winner, one that was cashed on by Randy Orton and basically sparked the plug for the Yes Movement. Winning at WrestleMania 30, one of the most iconic moments in WrestleMania history. Being forced to retire, which kind of brings him down a little bit in the full rankings. He missed 3 years because of that, but comes back, becomes the planet's champion, instantly the top heel, the whole Fickle thing, the whole, the championship title, part of the Kofi Mania storyline there. This is why he's good. He works both sides of the coin.
And I know I was certainly critical of the heel turn because he was such an organic face. I mean, he was really one of the first individuals in a very long time to get over with the fan base organically and have the whole Yes Movement thing, which, mind you, was something that not only was popular within the WWE and amongst the WWE universe, but also in sports altogether. I think the San Francisco Giants were doing that as part of their championship run. If they didn't win the championship, it was definitely during their playoff run.
Yep. Michigan State,
they were doing it at all types of arenas. So it wasn't just something that was confined to having success within the WWE. So for example, if you compare that to like Becky Lynch right now, the whole moniker, I'm the man. yes, that's very popular. It helps her sell t-shirts, but a lot of people outside of professional wrestling or WWE fans might not know what that is or who she is. You talk about Daniel Bryan and the Yes movement. There was quite a few people doing the Yes chant outside of WWE. Now, circling back to just him being a heel. So I was, of course, critical of the heel turn, but he knocked it out of the park. Having Kofi go on and have the Kofi Mania thing, really, you needed a strong heel to complement that. And he took the belt off Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan, sank his teeth into being that heel character and knocked it out of the park with that. He can be a good face. He could be a heel. And he's definitely one of the more successful individuals over the course of the last 10 years or decade.
Yep, and had great matches throughout the decade with the likes of John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Triple H,
Yep.
AJ Styles. It goes on and on. So no wonder why he is in the top 5 here. But moving on to number 3, AJ Styles. Now, AJ Styles is one of the very few that in the past decade has been a top champion in 3 different promotions: TNA, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and WWE. His WWE reign, his most recent one, lasting 371 days, which ties with Macho Man Randy Savage for one of the longest reigns in the title's history. Great match after great match with the likes of Shinsuke Nakamura, Samoa Joe, Daniel Bryan, as we just mentioned, John Cena, who he arguably had John Cena's best match at that Royal Rumble. How can you not put him in the top?
Yeah, Brock Lesnar, another one, like we said, as long as you put Lesnar in there with somebody who can complement his style. AJ went out there and had a really, really good match with Brock Lesnar. Somebody who is accomplished across all 3 of the organizations you've mentioned. Former member of the Bullet Club. Now he's in the OC. What can you say? What can you not say about AJ Styles? Definitely going to go down as probably one of the all-time greats.
Yep.
Future Hall of Famer.
And this is a guy that I think a lot of people might say his run with WWE has been underwhelming as far as match quality, but he's a guy that consistently has good match after good match, if not great matches. And I think a lot of that, is just the body of work that he's had for years. And look no further than his match at Wrestle Kingdom with Shinsuke Nakamura, that everybody wished that's the match they saw at WrestleMania. Unfortunately, they didn't get that, but we know what AJ Styles is capable of. Yeah. His promo's gotten better. His stuff with the OC is good for now, but everything with the Bullet Club, TNA, and his run as WWE champion is definitely one to talk about when you're talking about the best of the decade.
Absolutely.
Now, before we head to our top 2 here, let's talk about our honorable mentions. These are guys that either Ralph or I had in our individual top 10s, just didn't make our collective top 10. Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, Charlotte Flair, and CM Punk. Now, we go to the top 2, Ralph. We agree that they belong in the top 2. We just don't agree on who's number 1. Mm-hmm. So I'll start with you. Who should be number 1, the best wrestler of the decade?
So I'm going to preface with this because I think this is actually going to come down to more of a philosophical debate between you and I and probably people watching this, more so than just comparing the 2 individuals. So one of the things that I feel is most important that I've mentioned several times now is the ability to draw. Because at the end of the day, yes, it's still wrestling, but it's also still about business. Now, my number 1 of the past decade is John Cena. I'm somebody who is not a big John Cena fan, but I have to respect everything that he's accomplished over the last 10 years. Big match after big match. Somebody who you can rely on to go out there and, cut a great promo. I think that's definitely notable when you talk about leading into his feud with The Undertaker at WrestleMania. The Undertaker never showed up, not once until WrestleMania. He was responsible for building that week after week after week and really went out there and cut some great promos. You go back and you watch some of the stuff leading into his feuds with AJ Styles. Some of the really, really good promo work there as well. And then looking at some of the stuff he did with Roman Reigns, again, looking at the promo work between those 2, he's definitely, to me, when he's in the ring cutting a promo, it's definitely noticeable that he's a step above a good majority of the individuals who are currently under contract at WWE.
But what about his matches? Everyone says he's just the 5 moves of doom.
Yeah, and you know what? For a long time, I definitely considered him somebody to be the guy that was just the 5 moves of doom. But I think that he was really able to reinvent himself and really able to do different maneuvers. and put on some really good matches, like we talked about. AJ Styles. You look at his match with Brock Lesnar when Brock initially came back. Grueling match. Maybe not a 5-star match by any means, but it was still very good. You look at some of the stuff he did with Roman Reigns. Granted, it wasn't, again, not an all-time great match, but it was still very good. Some could even argue that the best match that AJ Styles had was with, with AJ Styles was with John Cena. You can probably say that about CM Punk too. It's probably up there as one of his better matches as well. So I think John Cena to me is somebody who not only can deliver when the spotlight is shining the most on him. He's a good promo. He's marketable. I mean, we know that he's a huge star outside of professional wrestling. He's in movies. He hosts the Nickelodeon Awards, the Kids' Choice Awards. So all of that taken into consideration, you have to consider John Cena. If you're not going to consider him number 1, you have to consider him in the top 5. For me, he's the number 1. I know who you're going to say, and I think a lot of people are who follow or are more into the internet-based wrestling community are going to agree with you, which is fine. It's everybody's opinion. So why don't you let everyone know who you have at number 1?
Well, my guy has delivered 5-star match after 5-star match after 5-star match for the last 8+ years in New Japan Pro Wrestling. We know about the 4 matches with Kenny Omega, his matches with Hiroshi Tanahashi, his matches with Tetsuya Naito, Sonata, Will Ospreay. It goes on and on. He just delivers the best matches with the best in the world. He has main evented 5 Wrestle Kingdoms at the Tokyo Dome. No one has ever done that in this past decade besides him. 720 days as IWGP Heavyweight Champion. I think many would agree is the most prestigious heavyweight championship in professional wrestling right now. There's no reason why he can't be. His character could be compared to that of Ric Flair. Without question, hands down, the wrestler of the decade is Kazuchika Okada.
I disagree.
I know you disagree.
And the reason I don't think it's Okada, and the reason I don't think you can put him at number 1 is because he hasn't done it in the biggest organization in the professional wrestling world. Now, New Japan Pro Wrestling is big. Don't get me wrong. But John Cena has delivered time and time again in the WWE, at WrestleMania, in every big spot imaginable against people that, whenever it's a big match, whether it's Punk, whether it's Brock, whether it's Daniel Bryan. I mean, you talk about people that he's been able to put over too, because I know that a lot of people will say that he buries all of them. He's been able to put over quite a few individuals as well.
Yeah.
To talk about the other thing we didn't even bring up was the U.S. Championship, the ability to have the open challenge. That was something that he really brought that championship back and brought prestige to it. That is my biggest thing. Okada's great, but it's not just about the professional wrestling aspect of it. And John Cena, to me, if you go and you ask people, who Okada is, a lot of people aren't going to know who he is. A lot of people that do know professional wrestling will certainly know who he is and know his body of work and know that he's great and all of that. But if you go and ask anybody who's outside of professional wrestling who is John Cena or who's Okada, they're going to know who John Cena is. And you have to take that into account, especially because WWE is the biggest organization in the world.
You can, but just the fact that John Cena acts in movies should not go against Kazuchika Okada as the best wrestler. We're talking about the best wrestler, not the guy that can cross over into different mainstreams. I get what you're saying, but you talk to a wrestling fan, everyone is going to say, when you ask who's the best wrestler in the world, one of the 3 answers is going to be Kazuchika Okada.
If that's the case, though, why isn't Omega ranked higher? Because it's not all about professional wrestling.
I understand that because, one, Kazuchika Okada has done it for a longer sample size in the main event for a promotion that, it might not be WWE, but it's the number 2. He's done it in the biggest spots for New Japan Pro Wrestling consistently, whether it's the G1 Climax, whether it's Dominion, whether it's Wrestle Kingdom. He sold out Madison Square Garden. He was in the main event at Madison Square Garden. Not a Ring of Honor match. It was his match with Jay White. That speaks volumes right there.
I think more of the reason that sold out was because people anticipated, like you said, Omega and the Young Bucks and all the Bullet Club being involved in that. And
but also Okada. People thought they were seeing Okada Omega 5.
So John Cena has never sold out MSG?
I'm sure he definitely has. I'm not saying he hasn't, but as far as a draw, Cena is definitely the bigger draw than Okada is right now. But you talk about everything else, Okada's got him.
So if you were going to start a wrestling promotion.
I start with Okada right now.
No, I'm not going to ask you to pick between those two. Do you start a promotion knowing that you're a business owner, wanting to have success and build on it and everything else with Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania or Randy Savage?
That's tough.
Be honest. Be honest.
It depends.
Because that's what this debate is. Okada is, I'm telling you now, Okada's a better wrestler than John Cena.
Yeah.
Hands down, in my opinion.
True.
But to me, when you continuously do it time in and time out, when you are the biggest draw in professional wrestling industry over the last 10 years, I mean, I don't think anybody would debate that John Cena's been the biggest draw in professional wrestling. It just comes down to, what do you weigh more? Like, do you want the in-ring ability performance that you get with Okada? And John Cena, he's able to step up and perform when he needs to be able to step up and perform. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I think John Cena could be number one. I'll give you the last say. Whoever you feel like is going to be number one.
Here's why Cena, I would not have it number one. You would make great points here. Here's the thing. He really has not been a full-time guy since 2017. Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, he won that 16th championship from Styles. Then he dropped it at Elimination Chamber. Bray Wyatt won it.
Yep.
And since then, he's been on very sporadically. Heck, this past year, he wasn't even on a pay-per-view.
Right.
So I get what you're saying. He's a draw. I get that he's delivered great matches and great promos and all that stuff. But Kazuchika Okada has just done it throughout the decade.
So you think because he's been more consistent?
Yes.
Or there more consistently throughout the decade?
Yes. And I think most people that watch wrestling, that appreciate good wrestling, will tell you 9 times out of 10, Kazuchika Okada is better than John Cena.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any debate with that. I think Okada is the better in-ring performer.
Yeah.
I think John Cena is based on in-ring ability is actually underrated, because a lot of people would say that he's not good in the ring, and I don't think that's a fair assessment of him, because when you go through the matches he's had, not only in this decade, but matches prior to the decade, Shawn Michaels, whoever, he's able to perform with the best of the best. So I don't think it's fair to say that he can't perform.
Right.
But because Okada has done it more consistently over the course of the decade and Cena's missed time, I'm willing to concede and say that. Okay, I mean, there's really no wrong answer. I'm sure people are going to say that Omega's the best.
Right.
That this is our list though. So
right.
We're going to say Okada's 1, Cena's 2.
Yep. So, and it's funny because on our community poll, Chris Jericho won. Out of our top 5, so I put the top 5. It was Cena, Okada, AJ, Bryan, and Jericho.
Okay.
Who voted number 1? It was Chris Jericho. So let us know in the comments who you think is the best wrestler of this past decade. Don't forget to share this all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. And for news, reviews, and conversations on everything pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti, my name's Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psycho Babble.